Let's get to the story of the day. Berkshire Hathaway making this huge bet on the railroads, one in particular acquiring Burlington Northern Santa Fe in a deal worth about $44 billion. Let's talk to the man behind the deal. It was all his idea. On the phone, Warren Buffett, chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. Hello, Warren. How are you?
Hi, Liz.
Well, what do you do? Do you just wake up one day and say, I think I'll spend another $26 billion in cash and stock for a railroad? How did this come about?
It came about because our board had a meeting that had been scheduled for a year down in Fort Worth, the reason being that we have 3 different businesses that we own in Fort Worth. And Debbie Bosonic, my assistant, said, let's do the next one in Fort Worth and check out those companies. So we went down there a week ago last Thursday, and I went down a couple of hours early because there were 2 people I wanted to see. One, my friend John Roach, and then the other one was Matt Rose over at BNSF. And while I was over there, we had about 10 minutes alone after some vice presidents made a presentation, and I said, Matt, if you're ever looking for a home for the railroad, Berkshire would make a good one. And he didn't throw me out of the office, so the next day I made him an offer, and he said he would take it to the directors, and the rest is history.
Okay, so it's a 10-minute meeting and then a week. That's awfully fast, but this is how you operate. You had already owned, of course, about 24% of Burlington Northern. What was it that crystallized your belief in that 10 minutes or the vice president's presentation that you ought to buy the whole thing?
Well, it wasn't. I felt good about it from the time we bought our first stock in 2006, but if we hadn't scheduled a meeting down there, it probably wouldn't have happened. At least it wouldn't have happened now. But I like the business very much. I think the management is the best there is, and when I didn't get thrown out of the office, I made it specific, and it was a good offer from their standpoint, and they decided to accept it, and now we're going to own a railroad.
Well,
and we never fool around on things, Liz. I mean, I tell the lawyers, get this thing done.
Well, I think Debbie Bosonic, your assistant, who thought it best to make the meeting down there, should get the big high five. Not bad at all.
Well, yeah, you'll see we didn't have an investment banker on the deal, but maybe we should have put her down.
She's smart enough to do it. What is it, Warren, that you see in the railroad transport area versus trucking or air cargo?
Well, the rails move a freight in a much more environmentally friendly way than than truckers do, and they also only use about a third of the fuel. So it's helping. It helps our trade balance in the long run. It helps in terms of the atmosphere. It is a very, very efficient, effective, environmentally friendly way of moving freight, and our rail system is a huge asset to the country.
BNI, of course, hauls about 10% of the nation's electricity generating coal. Is this, Warren, a bet somehow on coal?
Well, they haul a lot of coal, and coal from the Powder River Basin in the west is more competitive. It's lower sulfur coal than in the east, so it will be around a long time. But coal, over the long run, coal will diminish in relative importance.
There's a growing anti-rail lobby in Washington right now. I know you know because you do your homework on this stuff, with a push by the shippers to re-regulate the rails, the Railroad Antitrust Enforcement Act, if you will. Do you have any friends in Washington who assured you that railroads would not be re-regulated? Because I would imagine if the Obama administration went along with the shippers to re-regulate the rails, that might hurt your investment.
Well, I would say since the Staggers Act back in 1980, which diminished the regulation substantially, you've had enormous progress with the rail system. You've decreased prices on inflation-adjusted terms significantly. So I would say that the deregulation that took place starting in 1980 has actually benefited the shippers enormously, and we're moving far more freight, with using far less fuel very efficiently. So my guess is that people will see the rails for what they are, as really an outstanding way of moving freight around the country.
Cheapest, best way. But then there's cap and trade, Warren. Some analysts are very skittish about coal and a possible backlash if cap and trade goes through. And you've mentioned now, you said we're going to see a diminishing of coal used, but what do you think cap and trade would do to the business if that actually went through? Well,
it won't change the composition of what utilities are doing tomorrow or next week or next year. utilities over time are going to use less coal and probably more nuclear. And our own utility, for example, uses wind very substantially in Iowa. So over time, coal is going to diminish somewhat. Now, I think that will hit eastern coal more than western coal, but that's a fact of life over a considerable period of time. And that's true whether there's cap and trade or not.